For best results, use the assembly instructions in this video in conjunction with the assembly instructions in your Orbitrek X17 user's manual. Carefully open the shipping box and unpack all items, including the tools provided for assembling the machine. To prevent any damage to the floor area during assembly, it is recommended to use a surface covering such as a carpet to protect the surface. Disconnect the fixed tube, the bolts and the washers from the main frame. Note, the fixed tube is not part of the product and is used to protect the machine from damage during shipping. Once removed, it can be discarded. Screw the leveling feet into the ends of the front stabilizer and into the rear stabilizer. Make sure the transport wheels on the front stabilizer point forwards. Remove the two M8 by 15 mm bolts, the two 8 mm spring washers, and the two 8 by 20 by 2 mm washers from the front stabilizer. Place the front stabilizer against the main frame and align the holes in the front stabilizer and the main frame. Attach the front stabilizer to the main frame with two M8 by 15 mm bolts, two 8 mm spring washers, and two 8 by 20 by 2 mm washers, and tighten using the Allen wrench provided. Remove the two M8 by 15 mm bolts, the two 8 mm spring washers, and the two 8 by 20 by 2 mm washers from the rear stabilizer. Place the rear stabilizer against the main frame and align the holes in the rear stabilizer and the main frame. Attach the rear stabilizer to the main frame with two M8 by 15 mm bolts, two 8 mm spring washers, and two 8 by 20 by 2 mm washers, and tighten using the Allen wrench provided. With your fingers, unscrew the magnetic disc screwed into the left secondary crank. The left pedal and left secondary crank are marked with L. The right pedal and right secondary crank are marked with R. Note, reference to left and right is from the perspective of standing on the pedals and looking forward over the handlebar. Connect the strap marked L to the left pedal. Connect the strap marked R to the right pedal. Left pedal. Remove the nut and washer and insert the pedal shaft of the left foot pedal into the threaded hole on the left secondary crank. Screw the pedal shaft in by hand in a clockwise direction as far as you can. Then fully tighten using the hex tool. Warning: do not turn the pedal shaft in a counterclockwise direction, as doing so will strip the threads. Once screwed in, the threads of the pedal shaft should protrude behind the left secondary crank. Insert the arch washer. Then screw the flat nut securely onto these threads using the wrench. Right pedal. Remove the nut and washer and insert the pedal shaft of the right foot pedal into the threaded hole in the right secondary crank. Screw the pedal shaft in by hand in a counterclockwise direction as far as you can. Then fully tighten using the hex tool. Warning: do not turn the right pedal shaft in a clockwise direction, as doing so will strip the threads. Once screwed in, the threads of the pedal shaft should protrude behind the right secondary crank. Insert the arch washer, then screw the flat nut securely onto these threads using the wrench. Reconnect the magnetic disc by screwing it into the left secondary crank by hand until tight. Remove the 6 M8 by 15 mm bolts, the 6 8 mm spring washers, the 4 8 by 16 by 1.5 mm curve washers from the oval tube. Slide the shroud up the handlebar post. Note the orientation of the slanted side of the shroud relative to the resistance dial. Tighten the strap around the handlebar post below the shroud. Note, the strap is a temporary measure to prevent the shroud from dropping down and interfering with the assembly of the handlebar post. Bring the handlebar post in alignment with the main frame to perform step 10 and step 11. Turn the resistance dial to its lowest setting, that is, setting 1. This will extend the resistance dial cable, making the next step easier. Hook the resistance dial cable anchor onto the resistance cable spring hook. Be sure that the hook and anchor are properly connected to one another. Pull the resistance dial cable bush upwards to slide into the slot on the resistance cable bracket. Note, this step may require the use of a bit of force. Remove the cable ties or the rubber bands around the sensor wires. Clip together the sensor frame wire protruding from the main frame to the sensor post wire protruding from the handlebar post. Carefully slide the handlebar post into the oval tube on the main frame. Note, be careful not to pinch or damage any of the wires. Secure the handlebar post to the main frame with the previously removed 6 M8 by 15 mm bolts, the 6 8 mm spring washers, the 4 8 by 16 by 1.5 mm flat washers, and the 2 8 by 16 by 1.5 mm curve washers. Note, the curve washers are to be placed on the front and the back of the side of the oval tube. Release the strap. Slide the shroud down over the end of the handlebar post until it engages flush with the plastic cover of the mainframe, with the protrusion on the shroud slotted into the square opening on the mainframe plastic cover. Reattach and tighten the strap above the shroud. Remove the 4 M8 by 10 bolts, 3 M8 by 15 bolts, 4 8 by 16 by 1.5 millimeter flat washers, and 1 8 by 16 by 1.5 millimeter curved washer from the handlebar post. Bring the handlebar and the handlebar post in alignment. Cut the cable ties or rubber bands holding the sensor post wire and resistance console wire in the handlebar post. When cutting the cable ties or rubber bands, be careful not to accidentally cut any of the electrical wires or drop the wires into the handlebar post. Connect and clip the sensor post wire protruding from the handlebar post to the sensor console wire hanging from the console. Connect and clip the resistance post wire protruding from the handlebar post to the resistance console wire hanging from the console. Carefully tuck the connected wires into the handlebar post. Insert the handlebar into the top end of the handlebar post. Note: be careful not to pinch or damage any of the wires. Attach the handlebar to the handlebar post with the previously removed 4 M8 by 10 bolts, 1 M8 by 15 bolt, 4 8 by 16 by 1.5 millimeter flat washers, and 1 8 by 16 by 1.5 millimeter curved washer. Note: the curved washer is to be used on the rounded side of the oval tube of the handlebar. Open the console battery compartment cover and fit 2 AAA batteries. Then close the battery compartment cover. To move the machine, stand in front of it. Grip the handlebar with both hands and slowly tilt it towards you until the transport wheels contact the floor. Push or pull the machine to the desired location. Then slowly lift the handlebar to lower it onto the leveling feet of the rear stabilizer. Be careful when moving the machine, as abrupt and excessive bumpy motions can affect the functioning of the console. Note: a rubber mat can be used below the machine to protect the flooring. Place the machine on a clean, solid, level and horizontal surface, free from unwanted material or other objects that may hamper your ability to move freely. Ensure that the leveling feet attached to the front stabilizer and the rear stabilizer all make contact with the floor. If not, loosen the leveling foot locking nuts. Turn and adjust the feet one at a time until they are evenly balanced and are in contact with the floor. Make sure the machine is level and stable, then tighten the locking nuts. Note: do not unscrew the leveling feet too much to prevent them from becoming detached whilst using the machine, as this may cause personal injury or damage to the machine. Inspect your machine to ensure that all hardware is secure and all components are properly assembled. Do not use the machine until it has been fully assembled and inspected for correct performance in accordance with the user's manual. This completes assembly and setup of the Orbitrek X17.